Sometimes stories that we are really familiar with contain truths that we haven't given much thought to. Have you ever stopped to consider how radically loving the Good Samaritan was? Let's think about it. A Samaritan man was walking down a road from Jerusalem to Jericho. As he walked, there were Israelites, God's pure and chosen people, traveling the other direction in pilgrimage to Jerusalem. Maybe some gave him dirty looks. Maybe some crossed to the other side of the road to stay as far away from him as possible, and perhaps some even muttered insults to him under their breath. "Stay away from me, traitor. What were you doing up in Jerusalem anyway? You aren't welcome to worship God in the temple." The avoidance and open contempt might have triggered memories from childhood. Jewish neighbors who mocked him and called him half-bred. Trips to Jerusalem with his father where he saw the opulent temple that King Herod had restored, but also saw a priest standing outside to make sure he never came in to worship. Memories of a life always being made to feel other, less than, and like an enemy. Lost in these thoughts, the man continued walking until out of the corner of his eye he saw something in the weeds on the side of the road. Out of curiosity, he moved closer and saw an Israelite man badly beaten and unconscious. He turned his head and made to leave. No one would know he had even seen the man. As he took a step, he remembered the passage of Torah that he had meditated upon earlier that morning. "Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against anyone among your people, but love your neighbor as yourself." Love your neighbor as yourself. Was this man his neighbor? The passage did say, "Do not bear a grudge against anyone among your people." Every day of his life, Israelites like this man had been careful to remind him that he was indeed not among their people. They had plenty of names for him, and fellow Israelite definitely was not one of them. And yet he knew the spirit of the law. He knew that this man was indeed his neighbor. He knew that God's invitation was to love this neighbor as he would love himself. So he did. The Samaritan allowed the needs of his Israelite neighbor to interrupt his own plans. He loved him like himself by spending precious time to bandage his wounds. He chose to abandon some of the provisions he had just purchased in Jerusalem to make room on his donkey, and he placed the man upon the donkey. He took the position of a servant, walking alongside the donkey as he turned around and walked back up the road, the one he had just come down, in order to find the nearest inn. When he arrived at the inn, he loved his Israelite neighbor with his finances. He knew that because the man had been robbed, he didn't have any money to pay for the room. So the Samaritan paid 2 days' wages to cover the Israelite's room and board, and he promised the innkeeper that he would pay whatever more was needed when he came by the inn next. The Samaritan left his Israelite neighbor safe at the inn and resumed his journey from Jerusalem to Jericho. What do you think happened next? Did the Israelite even know? When he recovered from his wounds and resumed his journey, would he look differently at the Samaritans as he passed on the road? Later that week, that month, or that year, when he inevitably came upon a Samaritan in need, would he still cross to the other side of the road to avoid him? Would he treat him like an enemy, like someone less than human? Or would the Israelite man also step beyond the centuries of contempt and choose to love his neighbor as himself?